Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're digging into the April 2014 study by Belzer, Nock, Peters, and Jamieson titled Rethinking Butterflies, the Affective, Physiological, and Performance Effects of Reappraising Arousal During Social Evaluation, published in the journal Emotion. So, you know that feeling when your heart is just pounding right out of your chest before a huge presentation or a first date? Well, this one's for you. We're taking a deep dive into the psychophysiology of social anxiety and exploring how one tiny, simple shift in your mindset could literally rewire your body's response to stress.
I want to kick things off by anchoring us to the paper's opening premise, which highlights just how ubiquitous, and honestly how high-stakes social evaluation is for absolutely all of us. I mean, from job interviews to dates, or even just speaking up in a random Tuesday meeting, we are constantly presenting ourselves and being evaluated. And let's be real, most of us hate it, right? We try to mask those anxious feelings, we desperately try to stop our hands from visibly shaking, and we try to keep our voices steady. But what if our entire approach to handling that stress is just completely backwards?
We all know that awful feeling of those dreaded butterflies swarming in your stomach. So I've got to ask, how do you actually handle yours? Do you take deep breaths? Do you keep telling yourself, just relax, just relax? Because the study we're looking at proposes a solution that is completely counterintuitive. What if the secret isn't calming down at all? No way, right? But what if the real key to nailing that performance is actually embracing the stress and letting your body do exactly what it naturally wants to do?
Let's break down the core hypothesis the researchers tested here. It's a concept known as arousal reappraisal. Now, most traditional emotion regulation focuses on down-regulating, right? Trying to calm your nervous system down. Well, arousal reappraisal does the exact opposite. It shifts your mindset from fighting your biological stress response to actually using it. It's the psychological process of telling yourself that the pounding heart and the sweaty palms, they aren't signs of impending doom. Instead, they're actually your body's way of giving you the resources you need to absolutely crush whatever task is in front of you.
To actually put this into practice, the researchers gave a highly specific instruction to their experimental group. As the authors put it, they told them, "The increase in arousal you may feel during stress is not harmful. Instead, these responses evolved to help our ancestors survive by delivering oxygen to where it is needed in the body." Just imagine hearing that right before a stressful event. They totally reframed the bodily signals as an evolutionary advantage. The participants were basically told to reinterpret their physical panic as a super beneficial coping tool.
So, to test if this simple mindset shift actually works in the real world, the researchers split 85 participants into two completely distinct groups. The experimental group got that specific empowering reappraisal instruction we just talked about. The control group, they received absolutely no instructions like that. Instead, they just played a simple driving video game for the exact same amount of time, just to control for the delay. The researchers really needed to isolate this and see if just hearing that one single reframing concept would change everything that happened next.
And wow, what happened next was definitely not easy. To put the hypothesis to the test, participants were thrown into the grueling Trier social stress test. In psychology, this is basically the gold standard for inducing acute stress in a lab. Let's walk through this intense little gauntlet. First, you get a measly 3 minutes to prepare. Then, you have to deliver a 5-minute videotaped speech about your personal strengths and weaknesses to a panel of evaluators. And here's the real kicker. Those evaluators are strictly trained to give negative nonverbal feedback. I'm talking frowning, crossing their arms, looking completely bored and unimpressed. And then, immediately after that speech, you have to do 5 minutes of mental math, counting backwards from 996 in steps of 7 out loud to that exact same frowning audience. Yikes.
Right? It's a total nightmare scenario for most of us. But the researchers didn't just casually ask people how they felt afterward. They took incredibly rigorous measurements. They collected saliva samples at the baseline and again right after the stressor. They gathered self-reports on anxiety. But most importantly, they had independent, completely blind raters code the videotaped speeches for behavioral displays of shame, anxiety, nonverbal signaling, and overall speech performance. They were literally bridging the gap between how the mind perceives stress and how the body physically and behaviorally manifests it.
Okay, so an absolutely crucial piece of this puzzle is understanding what they were actually looking for in that saliva. They were assaying for something called salivary alpha amylase, or SAA. Honestly, you can think of this as a biological engine revving metric. It's a protein that acts as an index for sympathetic nervous system activation. Basically, it tells the researchers exactly how physically aroused, how stressed out the participant's body truly is on a biological level. This gave them a hard, undeniable number to compare against the visible behavior on the tapes.
And the data? It reveals a pretty stark contrast. Compared to the control group, the participants who were told to embrace their stress displayed noticeably less anxiety and far less shame. And this was true regardless of whether they were naturally socially anxious people or not. They also showed way more approach-oriented nonverbal signaling. That means they were making better eye contact, using appropriate hand gestures, and they weren't just shrinking away and hiding from those intimidating evaluators.
To really grasp the impact here, let's look at the specific effect sizes they reported. For the reduction in visible anxiety displays, the researchers calculated an effect size of D equals 0.63. Now, in the realm of psychology, that is a solid medium to large effect. It means this wasn't just some tiny statistical blip or a minor fluke. The people who were told their stress was a helpful tool genuinely, visibly looked less nervous to the blind raters who were watching their tapes.
We also see a really substantial effect size for the reduction in shame displays, with D coming in at 0.54. This is fascinating, because shame is a highly paralyzing emotion, especially during public speaking. A reduction here means these participants used far fewer of those self-handicapping apologies, like when you nervously laugh and say, "Sorry, I'm really bad at this." They physically appeared less embarrassed and less disengaged. Just by changing their mindset, they literally changed how confidently they presented themselves to a completely hostile audience.
But okay, hold on, because here is the major twist of the entire study. Remember that saliva test, the SAA? Well, the researchers found an effect size of D equals 0.59 for increased SAA reactivity in the reappraisal group. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. The group that looked less anxious, acted more confidently, and ultimately performed better actually experienced a higher physiological stress response. Their sympathetic nervous system was revving way harder than the control groups.
And that brings us to the counterintuitive climax of the entire study. It all comes down to this direct conclusion from the authors. Affective outcomes can be improved by maintaining or upregulating emotional intensity. The secret to their better performance wasn't calming down at all. It was letting that biological engine rev. They embraced the stress, their bodies pumped out more resources to help them, and because their minds had framed all that extra energy as a positive tool, it translated into better, more confident behavior rather than a total panic attack.
So to understand exactly why this works, the researchers ran a mediation analysis. This proved that the reappraisal instruction worked specifically by increasing the participants' appraisal of their own coping resources relative to the intense demands of the task. Put simply, altering your cognitive appraisal directly mediated and reduced those downstream outward displays of shame and anxiety. The mind literally reevaluated the body's physical state, and that one single cognitive shift changed the actual physical outcome.
It's also super vital to point out exactly who this works for. The researchers specifically tested both highly socially anxious individuals and non-anxious individuals. And yeah, as you'd probably expect, the socially anxious participants started with a baseline disadvantage. They naturally displayed more anxiety overall. However, the data clearly showed that both groups benefited equally from the reappraisal instruction. No matter what your baseline level of social fear is, reframing your stress as a tool works for you across the board.
To summarize the core takeaway directly from this source, the authors conclude, this research indicates that reframing stress arousal can improve behavioral displays of affect during evaluative situations via altering cognitive appraisals. By changing the way we frame our bodily panic, by choosing to see those butterflies as oxygen delivery systems that are actively priming us for peak performance, we can actually change our physical manifestation of stress out in the real world.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. The next time you're standing backstage, or maybe waiting in the lobby for a huge job interview, or sitting across from someone on a first date, and you feel your heart start to race, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight it and desperately try to calm down? Or will you let your biological engine rev, knowing for a fact that your body is just giving you exactly what you need to succeed? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.